Hello, chess fans. Welcome to the Max Murray Show. We're kind of like the Ohio State University here. I'm broadcasting to you from my basement along the banks of the mighty Mississippi River in St. Louis, Missouri. I am playing Joel now for the third time after having suffered two devastating defeats against the 1600 rated bot in my last two games. This bot, according to the chess.com fluff, is rated 1600. The bot fluff is that Joel is the name of this bot that's giving me these fits. Joel is reputedly not booked up on openings and is a good blitz player. However, of all the bots I've played thus far in the advanced section of the chess.com bots, Joel has given me by far the hardest game, and is punching well above its 1600 rating. So here we go. I got to hand it a defeat now, so we can move on to the next bot. I'm working my way through all the different advanced bots. D2, D4, second best by test. He's going for a kind of a Nimzo situation here, where he's going to develop his dark square bishop to a square like b4. I believe it was Steinitz. It might have been Sigbert Tarash, who, when Nemisis showed him this Nimzo Indian, said the moves were ugly. And I think Nemisis replied something like, yes, they're ugly, but they're effective, or whatever. It is, because it gets the kingside pieces developed and the king castle to safety, and black can later play for the center. So it is a well-respected, time-honored opening is the Nimzo Indian. It leads often to strategic play across the entire board. However, I'm going to play the same first 5 moves. You've seen them before, and you'll see them again. The distinguishing move of my signature opening, bishop to e2, not to the more active square, bishop to d3. Notice how it would become vulnerable on that square, and you start to have to know a lot of theory, despite being more active, because it eyes the h7 pawn for a potential kingside attack and supports the advanced e3, e4, but that's not really my plan. I'm going to castle to safety now and commence operations on the queen side as my usual. Joel, who chess.com claims has no knowledge or desire to play openings, is going into this Queen's Indian. It's a good response. The bishop deployed on b7 occupies the long light square diagonal and could become an absolute monster and the strongest minor piece on the board. However, I do have my knight very firmly defended by the bishop on e2. I can also more safely now play h2, h3 to create luft for my king and form the bathtub pawn formation, which I find to be very strong. We are going to continue, however, now, since I'm done with my first 5 moves. By the way, if you want to call this opening structure a name, or you have a suggestion of what to call it, that would be welcome. The computer calls it a Collie system, but I don't believe you have a Collie with a bishop on e2. The bishop has to be on d3 for the Collie system proper, or the Collie Zukertort, which would involve finishadowing the dark square bishop to the b2 square. He's coming in early with the knight. Not sure what that's all about. Maybe he wants to try to whip up an attack. The bot apparently, reputedly, has a reputation for attacks. So perhaps he's trying to open up this d8 to h4 diagonal. Now, in the 2 beatings that I've received at the hands of Joel, where I've been beaten like a drum and failed, I've been too positional, I think, in my calculations and not concrete enough. So today I'm going to try to speed up my game a little bit by focusing less on a constant analysis of all the positional intricacies on the board, and instead focus a little more on the concrete, which is the modern approach to chess. The old classical school in chess was centered on positional play first, and then tactical play arose from having a good position. But modern chess players that have grown up on the computer age have realized even anti-positional moves are playable as long as there's concrete reasons. And so modern players will play anything, no matter how ugly it looks, for concrete reasons. I think Mikhail Tal said that a move that is good for specific reasons is better and stronger than a move that is good on positional grounds. But what is his reason here for this? I don't know. I'm going to develop my knight to c3, its most natural developing square, where it controls squares in the center. I do also have an opportunity of bringing my queen to c2 here, which attacks the knight undefended as it is on e4. A pawn in the center is good. A defended piece in the center is even better. I'll attack it. Then he might have to play some weakening type move like f5, although he will have a grip on the light squares. So Joe going for a light square type setup here. Notice because I don't have my bishop on d3, this square was not covered, so the knight had an open invitation. The front door was wide open for the knight to occupy the center. Now, if you've been watching my games and you saw it yesterday in the beating that I received, when a knight hopped from c6 to b4 all the way to d3, where it was supported by a pawn, and then wrecked my position. I have a terrible blind spot playing against knights that are posted up on my side of the board. I just do horribly against them. I play weakly against them. I try to play around them instead of dealing with the concrete problems. So I think I'm going to play here knight c3. If he doubles my pawn, that's fine. It's doubled towards the center. I believe this formation is not a detriment at all. The benefits of having an extra pawn closer to the center of the board outweigh the deficits of the double pawns. Plus, it controls a key square. The backwards pawn does on b4, so I'm not concerned about this. The one challenge I'm going to have now, though, is what to do with my dark squared bishop, which is the next problem in my position that I've got to solve. The issue for me is it's trapped behind pawns. So it's trapped here, and I would normally bring it to b2 in my system. For that reason, maybe I should have considered, I'm going to have to look this up, how to play against an early e4. I might have considered playing b2, b3 before offering the b1 knight, and then developed here, and then and only then played the knight to c3, but I was petrified, traumatized by my opponent's knight play, and decided to just offer an exchange right out of the gate. The only remaining square for my dark squared bishop would be to come to a3 and try to offset his dark squared bishop. Both his bishops are good. The light squared bishop has potential free reign along this light squared diagonal, and the dark squared bishop does have a pretty good diagonal here, running from f8 to a3, and that diagonal might be strengthened by a d5 at some point, although I'll be able to exchange off my double pawn weakness, and then possibly even play here. So to get my bishop to a3, I'm going to have to support it. I'm going to have to support that square. Option 1, play pawn to a4. Now I can move my bishop to a3 where it's supported by the rook. Option 2, move my queen to b3, getting her off the back rank, still keeping her fairly close to home. She can come back to the second rank quickly. then play bishop to a3. I have not touched my a pawn in that situation, potentially turning it into a target. It's nicely tucked away here and inaccessible to black. It'd be a little more exposed on a4. With the queen on b3 and a bishop on a3, if the exchange happens, then my queen will be on controlling this dark squared diagonal from a3 to f8, and the tables will have turned on black. So I think I'm going to do that. It's a little more active. I'm also defending the backwards pawn, although it is also inaccessible at this time. What other drawbacks? Well, he could try to attack the queen somehow, but I don't think he's going to have time to allow this move. So what I suspect is going to happen is I will move to queen to b3, and then according to the false advertising of chess.com, where Joel doesn't know what he's doing in the openings, he's likely to play bishop e7, a traditional developing square for the dark squared bishop. And that way, when I do exchange off, he can recapture with the queen, bringing it to the dark square diagonal instead of me. Okay, and also keeping the queen on active on the d8 to h4 diagonal also. So this move, although apparently witty, if black plays sound chess, it should lead to nothing. An advantage of doing a4 here is I could try to start to work on this pawn structure. I like to play on the queen side. Problem is his knight on c6 defends that a5 square very solidly. He could also put a pawn on a5, and the knight on a5 attacks the c4 pawn, which is kind of a nimzo. This is kind of a nimzo structure in a lot of ways. You see doubled pawns. Black taking advantage of the positional vulnerabilities of doubled pawns in the nimzo Indian is a key strategic motif. I could also simply just bring the bishop to b2. Okay, so I'm deeply behind my pawns. However, if I do get these pawns rolling, and that's kind of my plan, is to continue expanding for space on the queen side, then this bishop will eventually get into the game, and I will not have committed my queen away from her home base yet. But we're going to play here. Let's see how Joel responds. I'm expecting, okay, he decided to close the diagonal instead. I didn't really consider this move, but of course it's playable. He is a little cramped, but he has exchanged off one of the knights already, so the more exchanges black does, the less the cramp matters. The reason why cramp is bad in chess is because the pieces that are cramped don't have squares to go to, and you run out of options as a player to place them. You become in a sort of a middle game zugzwang type situation where you're forced ultimately either to try to make freeing moves that are objectively bad, or put pieces on and leave them on passive bad squares. I have this option, which is a good reason why the queen was probably better on c2. I can also relocate the bishop to d3. You might ask, well, why did you move it to e2 in the first place? And that's a good response. I did lose time by doing that. However, they're often in these closed type of positions, time is of less importance, so shuffling my bishop back and forth, pacing as he would be like a prisoner in a cell between these two squares on d3 and e2, is not necessarily a hindrance. Notice he's striking at area nothing because black formed the bathtub pawn formation. Black is missing a knight on f6. That's an important defensive position piece should he decide to castle. However, I don't really have a way to whip up an attack unless I play something like that. Still have the problem with the bishop. Now I could put it on a3. It's not loose. It's not loose. and it is somewhat prophylactic to prevent d5. Black, I think, still plans to put the bishop on e2. Still perfectly good square. Very solid play here by black. Okay, I don't think this is best, but we're going to focus on development. There's the bishop. Okay, he's going to castle kingside. That's obviously the plan. I suppose he could have considered a queenside castle and a pawn storm, which would have played into the strength of this light square diagonal bishop. Now if I play, let's say, what if I play e2, e4? The pawn is loose on the e4 square after, I'm sorry, e3, e4. The knight could attack the queen, unmasking the bishop to take the free pawn. However, I could put the queen back on c2 where she belongs. The knight on a5, like I mentioned, does put pressure on the c4 pawn, but is currently defended by the bishop. With my bishop on a3, I also have the opportunity to try and crack the position open by playing c4, c5. Cracking the position open with the black king in the center makes sense, but concrete-wise, I might actually have a play, because if the black b pawn participates in exchanges on c5 after I play c4, c5, then bang, bang, okay? That bishop comes off. So now it's actually a serious look. Captures. Also rook to d1 strengthens that idea. It's actually, I might center my plans on this move. Rather than shuffling, I was really thinking about just taking more space and trying to hold black. But this is active play, an attempt to punish black's opening choices. Also opens up for the light squared bishop. The problem is, after he did move b7, b6, he does partially weaken these light squares. Of course, the black light square bishop covers those light squares, but they are slightly weakened. I want to bring this rook into the game. If he castled, now the rabbit's fled, okay? The pigeon has fled the roost, and I no longer have a king on the end of the rainbow should the center open up. But I have still... Rook attacks the queen. It's going to have to move somewhere. Then I can play here. Boom. Okay. The plan is here. Okay. Oh no. Joel, what are you thinking? Okay, finally, the chess bot rated 1600 who plays like a grandmaster, having beaten me like a drum during the last two games, held its own in the opening despite claims by chess.com that this bot knows nothing of openings, has finally made a dumb move. I don't know what happened here. There's some kind of wire got crossed on Joel's motherboard. A ridiculous move. I guess he could castle queenside by hand, sort of, but look, the rook is still sleeping on its square of a8. Right, so we're going to open up. We're not even going to think about this too much. We're not even going to think about it that much. Okay, I can capture here. Pawn takes. He is behind a pawn shield. Let's give him some profs for that. I could just continue to pry this position open. The rook coming to e8. Yes, he has brought his rook to the central file, where bringing the rooks to the center is important because most likely when files do open up, they will first open up in the center of the board. Now I want to think about, should I try to stir up trouble here? Yesterday when I lost against Joel, there was a moment in time when I could have won a pawn in the center and had a big advantage. I was already at points during that game yesterday up by the equivalent of almost 3 pawns, 2.9 something computer rating plus in favor of me. But I didn't see that. I didn't seize that opportunity to win the pawn. I didn't frankly see it because I was too worried about positional considerations as usual and not having my calculating glasses on. All right, so I can liquidate my doubled pawn, right? But I might want to also bring the rook here with the idea of when the liquidation comes, you could defend that bishop that way. So I go pawn takes, bishop takes, let's say. Then probably bishop takes bishop, then pawn takes bishop. Then I play c4 and continue like a battering ram to work on ramming my pawns down the c file. There's also, look at this pin, kind of a headache for black, pinning the black knight. He will stop it though with a7, a6. I could exchange the knight off. Probably don't want to do that. I probably don't want to do that. This is preparatory. Rook on a1 to c1. And I'd like to have all my pieces developed to reasonable squares before I start the shenanigans. Let's go here. Bishop. Now the question is, do I take? If he takes my bishop, my queen will take his, and now I own this dark square. He might try to trade the queens off. Trying to get the queens off is a good plan for him because in the end game with the queens off the board, you do kind of want to put your king in the center, so he will have, via some very bizarre wanderings, got his king into a good position if the queens come off. Let's exchange the pieces. It does relieve his cramp a little. Okay, now we're going to play with the plan c3, c4. Attacking my queen. Didn't really pay enough attention to this move, though I did earlier. Because he's going to try to pressure my c-pawn along this half-open file, possibly with the queen on c7. He is going to try to bring pressure against this pawn, but I'm going to try to smash things open, and it might even be worth losing a pawn. So you can see the queen has some good choices here. This retreat not so bad, although it keeps the queen within one leap of the knight, which could be an issue. If he plays bishop takes knight, I come back, force. Now I can cover that square again. I have to move the queen. The checks I don't think do anything other than get his bishop onto c6. However, with the bishop on c6, now d4, d5 comes with more force. And this pawn will be the next to fall. But I do believe I want my queen on this diagonal. And my rook is in a natural position to force this pawn advance. I could take that with tempo even if he tries to. I just go pawn hunting. So we'll bring the queen back to b2. I'm feeling comfortable in my position thanks to Joel's eclectic move. Now he's going to try to castle by hand this way. I can play this right now. We can play with haste and purpose. If he does play here, light square bishop here, the rook can't move. He's going to have to block. I play here. The king goes here. I take there. Probably pawn takes. I play here. The knight now guards the bishop, so the b pawn moving is no longer an issue for black. Plus the queen guards the knight even if the b pawn moves. So this construction is quite solid for black. Do I want to liquidate this now? Keep the center of the board fluid. I don't have, I believe I'm better here. Maybe by, if I had to guess, 1.24, something like that on the computer. But I don't think this is necessarily yet a one position. The knight is well quarantined by these black pawns. I play here, he could play here, blocking the center, and now this pawn is backwards. That way he moves the target. So he could defend the target, which it already is, by another pawn. He could create another threat. Don't think he really has one, except here, which I'm going to cover thusly. So in other words, he has a potential creating a threat by moving the rook to c8 and double attacking my c4 pawn. However, I'm going to bring my rook to c1, a very natural square in this position, for that rook and defend. Then he's going to take here. And when I take back, now he can take here. You see, it is a bit of a problem. This pawn is a bit of a problem, because it's only guarded by the bishop, who also has to guard this knight. The other thing is move the knight away from the maybe put the knight here, try to oust that, or better yet, get him to exchange. So one idea here is a little unorthodox, is put the knight here and windmill the bishop. Remember, I've talked about the pinwheel. I call it pinwheeling. I've talked about the pinwheel maneuver before, where I neutralize in this particular formation that I do with my opening. I neutralize any bishops that come to the long light square diagonal by removing the knight from the f3 square, replacing it with a bishop on the f3 square, and then exchanging off the dangerous shadowed bishop. That is usually to my advantage. The pinwheel's a little difficult to effectuate because the knight would be overloaded. Let's bring the rook here. Let's get the rook into the game. No, he's just going to move back and forward. So Joel is doing everything he can to give me an opportunity to win this game finally, after giving me severe drubbings in the previous two games. I have no excuse not to win this game after ridiculous moves like him displacing his king. Oh, what happened there? Okay, sorry. Displacing his king. By the way, do you like the color of the board here? I got it blue. I got it the wood board. Let's see. I'll show you. I have. Oh, I flipped the board there. I have the color combination is vintage pieces and dark wood. I love the vintage pieces. I really do. The dark wood, I think, is best for them, but the green chessboard is also nice. So leave a comment in the doobly-doo below if you'd like to see a different color combination of the chessboard and these pieces. I'm a classic type player, so I like the old school classic type pieces. He really wants to let me play the pawn to d5. The rook is gone now, so now it's even stronger to play the pawn to d5. I've got the pawn, my somewhat vulnerable pawn. If he takes this way, boom, okay, that hurts him. Maybe he's afraid of that. That's why I put the rook there. He might be afraid of some variations like this, and he wants to cover the h3 pawn with the h6 pawn with the rook. This feels right. It just feels right. Okay, we're playing intuitively. We want to open the position. I capture here. Now since I vacated the d square, I can bring the knight in. He's covered the g7 pawn with the queen as opposed to the king. I really thought he would play king to f8 to cover this vulnerable g pawn. How's he going to survive if I just keep this? I could play here and here first. I could play here and here. Sacrifice a pawn but open up problems for him. I could play queen here, and now this is a vicious threat. I don't want him to advance this pawn though and close things off. Also taking the d4 square away from the knight. If he does, if I get the knight on d4 and he plays e5, then I can move my knight to f5 and I'll be attacking this backwards pawn. Queen better placed now here, because that prevents him from playing the move e5. The knight would simply take the pawn and he cannot recapture due to the pin against this king. I'm not necessarily in a rush to take. I don't think. Now this pawn's exposed. This comes with tempo. I think this is better. I'm just going to try to keep my keep the threats going. Do I want to move the queen to here? The queen was on b2. I now have the option to move it to c3. I call these like booster moves. When your opponent has uncovered or vulnerable pieces or pawns that are not protected, the queen can gain time by attacking them, forcing a defensive response, and then moving again. So in effect, my queen has two moves here, as long as it moves to c3 first. Open the position. Now there's going to be a very lucrative diagonal for my light square bishop. We're going to continue to open the position. Do I want to play the accelerator move? Queen c3. Force him to tie him to the defense of this pawn. If he comes back with the king, then his rook is entombed. He could come back to with the king here, but then he's kind of playing into my hands. This exchange. This is nicely pressured. He wants to put pressure here, but I've got it covered. Can I add? Can I pile on? I would like to advance this pawn, but I think he'll be fine. Again, this construct works for him. This construct of the bishop on b7, knight on a5, queen on d8. This all works for him. Pinwheeling. There's a possibility to get my knight into the game now. It's not really needed for defense. He's not attacking me. He doesn't have his pieces coordinated for a kingside attack at all. They're not on the right squares for that. And in the pawn storm, he's diminished with his pawns on the kingside also for a pawn storm. It would be a minority pawn attack. This rook is a little sad. They don't want to be defending pawns and be so constricted to just 2 squares. Especially since this pawn, as Nemisis said, with its lust to expand, can't advance to c4, c5. Can I? Thinking about sacrificing? No. How would I bring a knight onto that pawn? Those squares are all covered, but not this one. So this is possible then. This is possible. Let's start knightly operations. Pressure. He left this pawn unguarded though. And it's like he didn't see. Now it's my turn to try to out-knight him. Let's not forget about this thing because it's a knight that did me in yesterday against Joel. The dog has come here too. But I've advised Toby that he can't recommend moves to me or suggest moves because that's a violation of fair play policy, even though I'm against a bot. Apparently you can't fair play violate when you're playing a bot. You can do whatever you want anyway. Alright, so I have to do some careful calculation. So knight here. Now I'm attacking the pawn. That's an issue. And I've got my pieces converging on the vulnerable d6 target. I also have this pinwheel. It's there. But the bishop might be useful for me now. Especially since the e8 square may become important if he wants to get his rook back in the game. Here we go. Fasten your seatbelts. He's going to defend it by moving the rook up. That was obviously the intent, or a major factor in his decision, the computer, to move the rook from its slumber square, its roost on a8, to c8, and now to c6. Can't I just play here and continue the viciousness? Yes, this is very tempting, I agree. It's not necessarily, though, a critical pawn at this time, with him so vulnerable. He's very vulnerable now. If I move bishop to the long light square diagonal, I'm threatening to win the exchange, renewing the threats against the d6 pawn. Notice I'm not threatening to remove the light squared bishop because it's covered by the knight. If I play knight takes pawn, then I'm threatening to win the exchange. This rook is going to have to move again, probably. Maybe go back. No, it can't go back. It's going to have to go here, maybe here. This is not a bad square for him because he shuts down my queen. Wonder why he didn't do that right away. He'd also, in theory, could swing this rook across and try to get up to a counterattack. Takes, nothing. If I go here and he tries to block with the pawn, takes, takes. No, he can't take because he's pinned. This seems like the most logical. Oh, okay. So I take my eyes off that pawn. You see, I almost got knight faked again. He almost knight faked me. Okay, but there's still a tactical possibility. Okay, pinwheel the bishop. It's now on f3. Not a classic pinwheel because the knight is taken 2 hops away and is no longer covering the f3 square. The king's knight. He goes here now. He's got a bigger threat than me winning the exchange by taking my queen, but I have a number of tactical options. One would be to sacrifice the exchange against the knight. Boom, boom. Then take the bishop off, and it looks like it's 2 pieces for a rook and a pawn, which is equal, but still with a lot of pressure. The other option is if I go here and he takes it with the knight, I just move my queen to here. Now I'm threatening the bishop. So the queen moves with tempo. I do get off of this juicy, I get kicked out of this juicy a3 to f8 diagonal with the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow in the form of the black king. Or I could just take this pawn. A pawn is a pawn. Take the material, as Bobby Fischer always said. Force this rook to move again. Then just come right back and increase the pressure. His problem is, he's got a lot of them, but one of his problems is the knight is a defender of this pawn, and the knight doesn't want to go in first. So, take the pawn, rook goes here, knight comes back. Now I'm threatening to take this pawn, and the first one in has got to be the queen, so he might have to put the rook back. He puts the rook back. Now I'm more inclined to play here. Let's take the pawn, it's material, and see if he's got any tricks. That's a check also. Does not want to move here. We'll put the knight back. Gonna defend this way. Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna defend that way. Yes, yes. All I've won really is a measly pawn. Less pressure here. I want to double my rooks now and just continue. Let's see, I have 1, 2, 3, and he's got 1, 2, 3 defenders. That's a possibility. If I can get that rolling. There's also this hanging. Don't forget I have the accelerator move. Reposition the queen here to the center of the board where she's very strong, and then come over this way. I feel comfortable being a pawn up now because now I feel like that if I flub all this, I will still have good winning chances in the endgame being up a pawn. Although probably in all this complication I had a way to put him away. Got to put this bot away. I do want to keep the queen on a3 though, because it prevents him from trying to move the pawn away. And he can't move his king. Boy. Go for double, go for here. I go for here, he can get it, his rook will cover it. I go here, taking a square away from the knight. There is a potential to start working on another target, to shift my targets. This bishop is no longer really needed here if I decide to keep my rook on c1. That's a much better diagonal. Again, freezes his pawn. He probably has no immediate ambition to move his Don't have a lot of time for this. See, he can do this pawn avalanche. And then he can do this pawn avalanche. That is the benefit of having the rook on h8, and I don't want to give that rook a job. With my queen in the center, I can now support this advance, and I still have pressure on the pawn. And I forced him to guard this. With my queen in the center, now maybe the bishop is a little stronger here because he's likely to have to defend that G pawn with the rook. And now when I bring my bishop to G4, he doesn't all of a sudden have H6, H5, because I'll just capture that pawn, and that's 2 down. 2 down. He's already 1 down in terms of pawns. He's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 by quick show of hands, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have him outnumbered. If chess were a democracy, he'd be in trouble. My pawns would outvote him. It's really a tricky thing to consider whether my queen is better placed on A3 with the pin or whether I should move her. She is attacking another target here, so she's attacking 2 potentially weak pawns and facilitating more activity in the center. So let's center her. I don't know if that's the best move. Going to defend with the queen. Now he's taking a little sights off of here, bringing up sacrificial motifs. Take, 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 take. Check. The queen is on the end of that, but is covered by the rook. She's coming down, attacking the always vulnerable f2 pawn. In the opening, the f2 pawn is only covered by the king. After he castles, it's covered by rook and the king. But anyway, I digress. The queen moving away, though, has now made this as a target. And if I could take this, then I'm starting to really peel his pawns off, picking them apart. The plan was to put the queen in the center. That also means knight takes pawn is on the table. So the queen is attacking here, and knight takes pawn is on the table. She's a little vulnerable, though. He can quickly put pressure on it, and I'm leading. This time I'm leading with my chin or my queen, as it's the first one involved in the recapturing. This move. He can't take this way because the knight falls. He has to take it this way, but that just helps him. I could take the rook. The king takes. Maybe there's a check here. I don't have enough. There could be some. This could be something. I've probably missed a number of tactical blows. I'm playing essentially caveman chess, making simple one-move threats. Now he wants the queens off, and he would like nothing better. But I have no intention whatsoever of exchanging the queens. Is she a danger here? This is pawn potentially vulnerable. I do have the fact that I haven't really found gainful employment for my bishop on e2. Could come back to f1 though, defend this pawn. So I'm kind of worried about this kind of attack. Do you see? But let's take the material. Now renewing pressure. Okay, renewing pressure. This is going to go, I think, next. It could go in a number of ways. The queen, not a danger on the long square dark diagonal, even though I am vulnerable to a back rank mate. It's not likely with these 2 rooks still on the back rank, and the fact that I do have the blocking move, bishop on e2 to f1. It's always kind of, I like to very much, as stylistically as a chess player, to have at least one piece around my king defensively at all times, even when I'm attacking. Rarely do I want to throw the whole kitchen sink at my opponent, and in general, I'm a positional player, not an attacking player. It's rare. It's rare to see me playing like this, but I had to. He forced me to by keeping his king in the middle and making funny moves. Um, if you force me to play good moves and attacking moves, I will. Well, now I can take here. The rook goes. We exchange off the rooks. I have to be careful in my back rank. The king takes. Now the bishop falls. Oops. The bishop falls next because the defender is gone. I take here. Rook here maybe. That's a check, though, so no matter what, I'm alive and well. I'm afraid now this is the exact moment in time where I'm likely to blunder. It's this type of situation. I've navigated these complexities reasonably well, probably not finding the best moves, probably not finding the knockouts, but I believe I'm retaining my advantage throughout. So while they're not necessarily the best moves or the computer's top 2 or even 3 moves, they aren't moves that throw away the game. And by creating just simple problems, even though they're one move cheapos, you do force black to react. Knight comes in, seems pretty strong, and then cemented if for some reason he decides not to go attack it. Then that knight on the d6 squares becomes what's called an octopus knight because of the vast number of squares in the enemy camp it controls. This is a move threatening to win the knight and the bishop. If he tries to defend this way, then I take. He takes. It's a little hairy. I think the easiest thing to do is simply win this pawn. And then cement the knight if there's some sort of tactical Houdini-like escape. This does finally bring my final piece, though, into the game. I have an outside passer. If I decide not to finish him here with a single thrust of the dagger to the throat, then I can kill him by paper cuts by advancing my A pawn to A3, A4, A5, A6, A7, A8 queen. It's a girl. I believe, though, that he strengthens his position if he can play D6, D5. Or not. I mean, that's part of the pawn screen gone. Boom. You know, he's in bad trouble. I think he's lost. He's been lost for a while, but he's badly lost. I'm going to take the material again. Bishop just simply moves away. I had not considered that precise move, but remember I had the antidote to anything bizarre, which is to cement the knight. Yeah, this is a good move. The rook can come over, join in with the queen somehow, if possible. If I do play c5, which is the backup plan, then he brings the rook over. I have to move the queen probably to a6. He can move another rook over. Can't go here, which is what I'd like to do. I could set up a discovered check, which may be even stronger than moving the c pawn to cover the octopus knight. Even if he moves away, the king away, I am still I'm still up. And the queen is shielded behind his own knight. Perhaps this was better. Didn't really consider this. It's a nice move. Check. I have to consider all the checks in the situation. Not particularly productive. The dark square here. He's likely to try to move his king away. He can't move his king here or here or here really to get out of the trap though. He's caught like a mouse in a mouse trap. Do you see that? So with my queen on the c5 square, I'm controlling this diagonal down to f8. So between the knight and the queen, we've got these three escape squares dealt with. He can keep his king in the center. Then he's moving into some more checks. And this rook is out of the game, which is important, I think, if I want to deliver a knockout blow. And if he moves his king here, then now the knight is sitting pretty without being attacked. I think that's the move. We're going to set this up. Just going to propose the bot problems. He does move away irrespectively to this square. The knight doesn't have well, this is this check. Okay, so this check here threatens to win the queen. He can't capture my checking piece. He's gonna have to move his queen there. Then I take the do I take the okay, well, I'm up the equivalent of 3 material pieces, so I'm just gonna liquidate. We're just gonna liquidate instead of going for the knockout punch. This is also check. It has the advantage of covering the 2 squares that block the check. But and uncovers this rook. Which would keep my queen on the board desirable. If he tries to bring the rook here, then I win the exchange. So, believe it or not, although this check is tempting, all it does is really get the queens off. But this check threatens to win an exchange. And also another rook at the end. I believe this is the better move. So let's calculate it. Okay? Let's calculate it. Either move wins. But I'm already winning. So, knight to f5 check. Okay? He can't interpose with any of the pieces because the knight will capture. If he goes here, then I capture the rook. He has to recapture. I bring in the second rook, my spare rook, which really isn't doing anything now at all. It really needs to get on friggin' diagonals, or open files, I should say. That's where they want to be, rooks. There's also simply bring my bishop into the game, just add more pieces. Now I'm threatening to win a piece. And I just keep this check in my back pocket. Also, it keeps my threats rolling. Since I can't really decide whether I want to play this and liquidate or try this, I need to get more pieces. I have 2 pieces not participating. I'm playing 1, 2, 3 pieces against his 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, I can take advantage of his king running around like a maniac. The issue with his king now, though, is he cannot escape this box easily, and this rook stays in. So I'm a rook up. If I can bring my other pieces in the game, I'll be a full rook up de facto, whether or not I capture. If I bring the bishop here, I'm attacking the knight. It can counterattack against my queen. I can come down here. Yeah, he doesn't really have anything. So this is the move. We're going to avoid the check. He's covering. Now I can just take the rook off. Or can I? If I go knight here, queen here, yeah, I don't quite finish him, you know? We don't quite finish him. He's going to be a little difficult to finish. The reason is, okay, I still have the queen threat. He comes here. I need this piece in the game. Let's suppose I take the knight off since it is a good defender. He's likely to recapture with the bishop and then check. See, if I go here check, it seems like the obvious move. I'm going to take the rook, right? But then he blocks with the queen, and my queen is undefended. So that's going to force me to exchange, and when I do, the rook moves away from my attack. When the rook moves away from my attack, I can bring the second rook down now, because the rook can still defend this back rank. I want to get this last piece in here. Might be the move, and now I'm going to threaten to take the knight, bring the rook down to check, and remove that rook. He's not threatening anything. If the knight moves away, he's got a discovery, but I can just take the rook off. He's defending wellish. Maybe I should have just liquidated. If I move this rook away, he could eventually get at this c4 pawn, and in the flurry of moves, take it up. Of course, the problem with having the rook on the open b file is this knight controls that square, but my plan is to get rid of it. The knight a key defender. Let's continue the pressure, get as many pieces as I can into the attack. Now he's again trying to exchange the queens. Maybe I want to move here, threatening the bishop and keeping this check alive. If I take, I can't come down for the check, or maybe I can't. So take, okay, I got to be careful now. Take, probably bishop take, then I have either one of these checks and take. So that seems like just ends him. This check blocks the queen. He's in check. I don't know. I don't see it yet. I could maybe sacrifice a rook and force the knight and move the other rook in. So that's interesting. So calculation not my forte, but let's suppose I move knight to f5. Check, right? He goes here. That's not mate because it's covered. Okay, there's probably something again here, but let's go through the win the rook scenario. Queen takes queen, pawn takes queen. So how are you going to win the rook here, Max? Well, here's the plan. I'm going to take bishop takes knight. Either way he captures it, I'm going to bring one of these two rooks down for the check. He will have to vacate. He can't, well, he can block the check if he does with the bishop. You see that? But if he does that and my knight is still here, I can take this way. So here we go. Even if this is wrong, I have the equivalent of a 3-pawn advantage, which should be enough to win. Okay? He's just going to let me take pieces off. He's just going to let me take pieces off. We're just going to liquidate. We're going to play somewhat quickly here. Probably here. Continue the liquidation. Can't play that. My thought was to play knight here, attacking the rook, but he's just going to... I told you this c4 pawn might drop at some point. This is a little risky. I feel like there could be some tactical problems, but let's do it. The bishop is nicely placed because the king is cut off from this c pawn, which may ironically win the game for me. If you remember that, I believe this was the backward pawn in the whole construct coming out of the opening. Rooks belong behind passed pawns though, so moving the rook behind might be an important to do that now before black does it. Yes, he will get his king, but I will get my knight going. He has 3 pawns. Two of them are doubled and one is isolated. Those are targets, and I have to play the lift move, at least this, or get my king to the center. So this is just technique. If I try and run, he attacks the knight. I cover the knight. He comes behind the pawn. I can still cover the pawn this way, but I never get to this square. We're simply just gonna liquidate. We're not gonna. That's a check. That's gonna lose you a pawn, Joel. Okay. That we're not gonna complicate things. At least this is a lesson in how to play chess without going into the complications and mating your opponent brilliantly. So if you want to learn how not to play brilliancy, this game is for you. Just play moves that create threats, and eventually you'll win something. Okay, I do want to create lift, and I can defend this pawn on the square, which is nice because it's... Let's give him problems. Okay, and now my king. I might want to do that and just try to force this pawn in, or let's bring the king towards the center. That's what you're supposed to do according to Russian schoolboy chess. I do want to get to this square. Boing, boing. He's got control of the square in front of the passed pawn, which is what you're supposed to do. So I might want to post up my knight here in the center. That would support the advance of the pawn. Meanwhile, there's this. I could take there. Let's just, because look, his king is in a weird spot. The reason why that's a weird spot is because he can't bring his rook to the last rank to defend the queening of my pawn, the coronation. So, sacrifice, just for the peanut gallery. Takes, push. He can get his king to here in time, so no good. For some reason, he has decided he might be trying to come over and deal with the pawn by a very circuitous route. Let's go here. He wants to come here, check. That's fine. I might plan I'll step through the trap door, through the looking glass to f3. I've had a bishop on f3, I've had a knight on f3, and now my king is on f3. I can advance. That gives him problems. This, not a target. Not a target yet. My king is now tethered to the defense of this pawn, though. That's the problem. But this combination should beat his king. Endgame, what you want to do is outnumber your opponent with your pieces. And I've got his king outnumbered 3-1. His rook, if it stays here, doesn't really count. And if it does move away, then I can mobilize all this. I can also simply create a second pass pawn, and that distraction would be enough to win easily. In fact, I might do that. He's giving me a check. Then there's a tempo move, and then I can put the knight here, and whichever way the rook goes, my knight has a check. So the plan is here, 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 threatening the rook, right? So he can't take the pawn. The rook, say, goes over here to prevent me from moving knight to b6, but I fake him out and go knight to d6. And if the rook is damned if you do, damned if you don't. Suppose he just, I don't know, moves here, attacking. Still the check. I think this works. He's coming here. Okay. Oh, I should have played check first. Oops. I messed up the order of operations. But does my plan still work, though? Basically, do I luck into this plan still working? Knight to b6, controlling the queening square, the coronation square. Rook to b5 to try to chase away the knight, but I have a check, an intermezzo. He can't move his king, and then it goes in. So, oh, okay, spite check perhaps. But it's not something I considered, though, which is a little scary. You don't like to be checked. You don't like to be checked. Moving my knight into the end of the board. Okay, so let's look at this calculation. Endgames are all calculation. You can see I'm flubbing this. Knight a8 check. King comes back. He could come straight back, and then I go here. Now the rook is here. The knight is trapped in the corner. I've got to do something with my knight. I'm just going to have to bail out, guys. We're bailing out. We're going to have to do this the old-fashioned way. The idea is I want an outpost here for my knight. That's fine. My king had to go up the board anyway. I thought I might go here to tether me. Yeah, it's pathetic. I agree. I agree, it's pathetic. I do agree, it's pathetic. I gotta reset up this whole thing again. I need a target. He goes here. Takes. Threatened to take that one too. He has to come back to a passive square. There's a check. Here. He can't take the pawn because of that, so that doesn't work for you. Okay, so that finished him. And he's just going to give me his pawns. That's fine. Looking for the stalemate. Now the question is, do I queen? That's the most expeditious way to defeat him. Yes, I'm gonna queen because I'm a coward. I'll try to mate him too, maybe. Gotta be careful. This threatens a mate. You can escape to this square. Can't stop that. Here's stalemate, isn't it? Yeah, that would be stalemate, so that's not desirable. But he's gonna have to move again. When he does, I'll check him. Joel, you're going down and I can move on. I think it was a reasonable game. I'm gonna be curious to see what I missed. How do I mate him now? There's gotta be a mate in 2 here or something. There's gotta be a mate in 2. Check and mate, probably. Check and mate, I think, does it. And the coup de grace. Alright, well done by me. Thank you for the game. Thank you for watching. I think it was interesting. Hope you weren't screaming at your computer monitor too much over the moves I was missing. Earlier in that hectic middle game, it was a nice game. I think Joel came apart though. For the first time in 3 games, the bot played at 1600 level. Okay. Ciao. See you tomorrow when I move up to the next, 3rd and final 1600 bot in the advanced series on chess.com of the bots. And then after we hand that bot a vicious defeat, then we go to 1700. Ta-ta. I'm sorry, I'm trying to bring up my OBS. That's where I'm doing this on. All right, bye-bye.